The sky above was a swirling maelstrom of fire and shadow. The exiled ones plummeted toward the desolate world below their punishment. Declared by the council apt out their crime unspoken, their fate sealed, they were bound in iron chains, their breath stolen by the void. As they descended into a place from which none ever returned, the wind screamed in their ears, the ground rushed to meet them, their bodies slammed into the hardened earth, and pain exploded through every nerve. Dazed and broken they lay in the dust, the air thick with the scent of decay, the sky above a canvas of eternal dusk, their chains shattered upon impact, yet their souls remained tethered to the decree that had cast them here. The silence was vast, the landscape barren, jagged rocks. Two of the fallen rose first, their eyes meeting filled with a fire of defiance. They had been enemies, before rivals in the great city. Above now their survival hinged upon unity. One reached out his hand rough with scars, the other offered no mercy, only a singular truth. Together they might endure, alone they would perish. The wind howled across the wasteland, carrying the scent of something rotten, something alive. Their first test came in the form of shifting sand beneath their feet. The ground cracked and split open, revealing a maw of churning darkness. Tendrils erupted, grasping at their limbs. They moved as one instinct driving them forward. They leapt, they fought, they tore the shadows apart. But the darkness did not bleed, it whispered promises of surrender in voices they once knew. They fled until their lungs burned, until their limbs screamed, until the ruins emerged from the horizon, towers, broken arches. Find answers here, they might find doom. One of them stepped forward, the other hesitated. An ancient door loomed before them, sealed by glyphs, pulsing with forgotten power. A choice lay before them: to enter was to risk their souls, to turn away was to accept ignorance. The door groaned open, dust curling into the dim light beyond, and there it stood, a sentinel of rust and bone, eyes glowing like dying embers, a construct of war forged in ages past. Its voice was the grinding of stone, its words a challenge. Speak and prove your worth, or be unmade. They spoke in tongues long buried in time, their voices echoing in the empty chamber. The guardian listened, it did not move. Then at last it stepped aside, allowing them to pass. Beyond the guardian lay the heart of the ruin, an altar of obsidian carved with the history of this dead world. The air hummed with ancient energy, runes flickered, revealing visions of the past, a war that had torn reality apart. The gods had turned their backs, the world had died, but something remained, something waited, watching, yearning for release, and in the center of it all a blade rested, half buried in the stone, black as midnight, hungry as the void. One reached for it, drawn by an unseen force, the other shouted in warning. Too late, the moment skin met metal, the air shivered, the ruin trembled, the past surged forth, engulfing them in a tide of memory and pain. They saw the last moments of the world before its fall, saw the gods in their fury, saw the weapon that had sealed their fate, and in that instant the blade whispered, and it knew their names. The blade did not merely cut, it consumed, it burned, it rewrote their flesh with sigils of power, the weight of its hunger settling into their bones. They were no longer merely exiles, they were claimed by something older than judgment, older than law. They had become vessels for an ancient will, their eyes glowed with the knowledge of things best forgotten, and as they turned away from the altar, the ruin shifted behind them, whispering farewell or warning. With every step they took, the world seemed to stir, the wind carried voices of unseen watchers, the shadows moved with purpose. Something was waking, something was aware of them. They had taken the blade, and in doing so they had changed everything. The sky deepened into an abyss without stars, the ground pulsed beneath their feet. They had become more than exiles, they had become catalysts for something neither alive nor dead. They were no longer alone figures, moved in the distant silhouettes against the eternal dusk, eyes glowing with malice. They had been seen, they had been marked. They ran, not knowing if they were running toward salvation or into the jaws of another trap. The land twisted around them as if trying to devour them. The whispers became screams, the sky wept fire. Something pursued them, something that had waited for centuries for them to make this very mistake. They could run no longer, their backs to the edge of a chasm, too deep to see its end. They turned to face their hunters' figures, wrapped in chains, their forms shifting between man and spectre, eyes hollow, mouths filled with the voices of the condemned. But they would not bow, they would not kneel. They had been punished, they had been exiled, but they would not be broken. They raised the blade, the air split with its hunger, and they fought. The battle raged beyond time, beyond reason. Every strike carried the weight of the past, every wound bled with memory. They did not fight as mortals, they fought as something more, something forgotten, something feared. The blade drank the souls of their foes, but it did not satisfy its hunger. It turned upon them as well, demanding more, always more. They fought not only their enemies, but the very force they had bound themselves to. Victorious yet shattered, they stood among the remnants of their pursuers, the world silent once more. But silence was not peace. The blade whispered of the truth buried in the heart of the world. They had not been exiled for crime, they had been exiled for knowledge, for daring to seek what the gods had hidden. The ruin had been a prison, the blade a key. They could walk away, they could forget, or they could go deeper into the abyss. They did not turn back, they did not seek escape. They had come too far, they had seen too much. They stepped into the darkness, not as prisoners, not as pawns, but as something new, something that would change the world or be devoured by it. The abyss welcomed them, and the last light of the sky faded behind them. The darkness did not consume them, it remade them. The power they had taken reshaped their forms, their minds, their purpose. They were no longer exiles, they were no longer victims. They had become something beyond mortal sight. The blade pulsed with finality, its hunger finally sated, and with their last breath in the old world they stepped into the new one, forever changed, forever feared, forever bound to the will of the abyss. And in that moment, the world itself shuddered as if in recognition of what had been reborn, what had returned to reshape the fate of all existence.